So I believe that the first time I waded into this transgender issue, I already had people saying, you should check out Essence of Thought. And ever since then, whenever I make a video about transgender people, I get more comments suggesting I check out Essence of Thought. So I did a while ago, as that happens, and the channel is 50% low-hanging fruit responses to Christian YouTubers and 50% talking about trans stuff. But I've generally been unwilling to respond to any of these videos for 3 reasons. The first reason is that Essence could run fucking rings around me on this topic. There's no doubt about that. Essence actually, cites things in their videos and includes peer-reviewed studies. This is clearly the topic on which Essence is the most well-read. Now, the flip side is that I'd probably run rings around Essence on international relations theory, because that's the topic on which I am the most well-read. And I'd also suspect that if Essence ever took their atheism beyond simply responding to the lowest of low-hanging fruit and actually tried to engage some real theology, I'd probably run rings around them there too. So I'm not saying that Essence is some super genius, I'm simply saying that really engaging with the academia generally translates to being an authority on that topic. And even at this point, if I did try to establish myself in this topic, I'd be surprised if I'm ever going to be able to handily refute many of Essence's literature-based videos. But the second reason is that I don't actually care about most of what Essence discusses. You see, I do want to start reading into this topic because, shameless Patreon plug, my plan has always been to read more and more as my Patreon gets more and more money, and therefore bring more and more of that research into my videos. Indeed, when I reach $50, I plan on reading 1 academic book a week, and then 2 books when I reach $100, because when I was at university I used to read a book a day, because I had all the time in the world back then. Went a bit Jamaican there. Indeed, any time I do reference a book in my videos, it's almost guaranteed to be a book I read at university or even before then, and almost certainly not a book I've read since I've been working, because between working and my podcast and a YouTube channel, my time is pretty valuable. And when I could spend 8 hours reading a book cover to cover in order to make a well-researched video that might well get less than 100 views, or alternatively spend that time making a considerably easier video that might get slightly more views and leave me with much more free time, well, but when I do start reading into this topic, I already know that my first port of call is going to be the transgender philosophy reader, because that's what interests me, the philosophy of this transgender idea. The science of it is utterly uninteresting to me, because I don't believe this is a scientific issue. Woman is a socially constructed label which I believe should reflect an individual's relationship to both particular ideals of femininity and also the physical reality of having a female body. You can't just throw science at the idea in order to refute it. So while it's possible that Essence is wrong on the science, I don't think that it matters that much either way. And number 3, Essence has a really annoying voice. I like to try and enunciate things as clearly as possible, and meanwhile, you have people who talk like they've got a mouthful of marshmallows, and those are the 3 equally valid reasons why I don't feel like responding to Essence of Thought. I hope you enjoyed watching, and please subscribe for more content like this. I'm kidding. You see, while Essence is very good at reading articles and then presenting the information contained in those articles, something that they seem to be lacking is the ability to, actually make intelligent logical deductions and arguments themselves. It's somewhat ironic that the name of the channel is Essence of Thought, when the ability to come up with unique and interesting insights seems to be an area where this channel is lacking. They should probably change their name to Essence of Reading a Bunch of Sources and then regurgitating them, because when Essence doesn't have other people to do the thinking for them and simply tries to argue without appealing to sources, you see that they're basically an idiot. So I want to talk about how Essence of Thought handles what they perceive to be anti-trans sentiment, ranging from mean comments on the internet to actual physical assault, and the various problems with their attitude and intellect along the way, because I would contend that all Essence has to offer is a bunch of sources, and in that case, I might as well read the sources. I hope to demonstrate here that when it comes to actual arguing, Essence isn't worth taking seriously, and if I were making a response video, which I am, that's what I'd be doing, engaging the arguments. If I wanted to deal with a massive list of sources, I'd go straight to the sources. So first things first, Essence is really fucking embarrassing with how triggered they get, because I was checking out Twitter and I saw Essence just incessantly complaining about people, and by the time I'd get this uploaded there'll probably be even more examples, because between me having the idea for this script and me actually writing this, there have been even more examples of this. Like, they got a comment saying, dumb fag, And they're implicating Stephen Woodford, aka Rationality Rules, in these comments, like, as if that's on him. And honestly, who the fuck cares enough to screenshot this, crop it, edit it, and then upload it to Twitter? Now, obviously, don't call people fag or faggot or anything like that, but these videos by Essence have thousands of views, and the internet is a very shitty place. So one user called you a fag, and to me this just shows that Essence isn't actually as oppressed as they like to pretend they are. Because can you imagine for a minute if an actual woman went to this much effort to draw attention to these shitty comments she receives? It just doesn't happen, because for actual women who experience actual misogyny, this is ubiquitous. But because Essence of Thought is not a woman, they basically just get the same low-effort, uninspired trolling that every other man on the internet gets. But unlike every other man on the internet, they don't just ignore it, they fucking screenshot it to show how oppressed they are. And again, I'm not saying that calling somebody a faggot is acceptable, or that the use of the word either casually or as an insult is not an issue. I very much believe it is. But every man on the internet is called a faggot. It's just not every man has a persecution complex that means they put this low-effort bait on Twitter to show how oppressed they are. And this is ignoring the fact that he implicated Rationality Rules in this comment, as if this has a single thing to do with them. Oh, and I also like how disagreeing with the progressive left on any point is conflated with pandering to the alt-right, because all Stephen did was say that he believes so-called trans women shouldn't compete in women's sports. A pretty minor disagreement, but suddenly it's pandering to the alt-right. But then it gets funnier, because this was just something I noticed just now, but I really wanted to talk about this comment on a Rachel Oates video. Now, I should say, I don't know who Rachel Oates is, and I don't care. I think they're one of those YouTube atheist types, which isn't a good sign, and maybe if I knew them, I wouldn't agree with their politics, but that's irrelevant. The point is, somebody left a comment saying, "Who's lying about you and where can I break their knees?" Alright, so no big deal, right? People use this kind of hyperbole all the time. Like, if you've ever seen the film John Tucker Must Die, then you're familiar with the idea of using violent language to express anger at somebody who has fucked over somebody you care about. It's not an actual threat of violence. It doesn't matter. It's basically just a supportive comment being left for a YouTuber by a fan on a video about how said YouTuber feels that they are being slandered online. And of course this YouTuber favourites it because it's a supportive comment, basically just saying, fuck that person who's lying about you, I'm angry at them for making you feel this way. But Essence of Thought fucking posted this same image 3 separate times on their Twitter with 3 separate messages to accompany it. The first message, she fucking favorited that comment. I knew she was bad, but to favorite a threat of violence against a trans person for sticking up for their human rights. Yeah. She favorited the comment because it was a supportive comment made in the video where she's talking about something that's bothering her and something that is upsetting her. Also, just because you're a trans person doesn't mean the English language has changed for you. People use violent language insincerely to express distaste for somebody because of the actions of that person. Just because you're trans, it doesn't therefore mean that obviously insincere threats of violence are magically transformed into oppression. And as for the comment about you sticking up for human rights, fucking melodrama. Second comment, guess this proves I was right after all. Own separate tweet, just on its own, because that's how offended Essence is by this harmless comment. Third tweet, hey, I know what will prove I'm not a bigot. Favoriting jokes calling for violence against a member of a community that already suffers extraordinary amounts of violence for refusing to kneel before me. Essence of Thought is honestly like mentally ill, and not just in the obvious way. Like, the fact that this impossibly harmless shit bothers them so much just makes me feel sorry for them. And I'm not using mentally ill as an insult, because I have a mental illness myself. I'm saying that one of the things that defines mental illness is if things that shouldn't bother you a lot. Like for me, I have to wear sunglasses when I go outside because the bright light triggers my anxiety. And I get really, really uncomfortable if I'm ever in a situation where I can't wear sunglasses. That's not normal. And neither is making 3 whole tweets dedicated to a comment which has absolutely nothing wrong with it. Oh, and by the way, I did watch some of Rachel Oates' video in the end, and it seems that she also has some kind of anxiety disorder. So if Essence of Thought can get pissy about a harmless comment that they interpret to be anti-trans because it's directed at them, then surely that can be turned back around on them when it turns out that they've been making some comments that have exacerbated the anxiety of somebody who suffers from panic attacks. And the funny thing is that I've seen loads of trans people come out and say that they actively dislike Essence of Thought because of how obnoxious and hypersensitive they are, and how they always escalate things. And it's like, I mean, here's your evidence. If being perpetually offended were a gender, then I might actually agree that Essence of Thought is in fact transgender. See, when I first covered the Rationality Rules drama, I made the prophetic statement that even when transgender activists are right, they're still wrong. If you haven't seen that video or just don't remember what I meant when I said it, my basic argument was that trans activists often act so unsavory and divisively when correcting people who make mistakes that it ends up hurting their movement more. And here we have a perfect example of that. All Essence of Thought needed to do was correct Stephen, and then boom, Essence of Thought gets to go down as the most prominent person to correct Stephen, and Stephen concedes that he was wrong, and it's a win for trans identity politics, but instead, Essence of Thought attacks Stephen, while Stephen stressed that he never meant to hurt anybody's feelings, and then Essence of Thought attacks Stephen's apology as insufficient. And we end up with a situation where Essence of Thought has managed to turn a lot of people off trans identity politics, even though, by Stephen's own admission, Essence was right about a lot of things. But the way that Essence presented these corrections made it clear that there's more to being right than simply having the facts on your side. Part of it is about how you choose to present yourself and how you deal with those who make earnest mistakes. So really, some advice to my gender critical feminist subscribers. If you want to turn people against trans identity politics, just be wrong loads and loads, and then inevitably the trans activists will come out to attack you for being wrong, and in doing so, make it clear how hateful their movement is. Because now Essence of Thought is going down as the most prominent critic of Woodford, and in the eyes of most neutral observers, Essence of Thought seems to be somebody who has aggressively attacked somebody who really didn't do anything wrong apart from make some mistakes in their video. Also, the line, refusing to kneel before me, is so fucking funny, because Essence of Thought has been constantly positioning themselves as superior to Stephen. In their first video, they were very condescending and attacked Stephen's moral character. And then with every subsequent retraction and apology Stephen has made, Essence has been there saying that it's not good enough. Essence even took it upon themselves to present Stephen with a list of trans charities for him to donate to in order to atone for his sins. And yet it's the trans activists who are being asked to kneel and grovel, claims the trans activists, as they slander everybody they can while accepting nothing short of complete self-flagellation in the way of penance. So it's with all of this in mind that we move on to the video, multiple trans teens violently assaulted in the UK, trans hysteria. So let's just check that out. So first of all, we have the argument that the idea of somebody being a transtrender is false because trans people are bullied and therefore they can't be choosing to be transgender.
Transtrender, a term invented by anti-trans voices as a means to frame trans folk, typically teenagers, as people claiming to be trans for the sake of social status. But talk to most trans people in either the US or the UK, however, and the woefully detached nature of this label quickly becomes apparent. Trans people suffer untold social stigma, the constant fear of rejection, and assault. So the pretense that trans people are trans because of some fad, because it makes them popular, is total crap.
Now, there are three problems with this argument. Firstly, there's a reason why I had a significant little preamble about Essence of Thought's Twitter. It's because some people love to be offended. Essence is addicted to being offended. Essence is addicted to being persecuted. This is why Essence posts low-effort bait troll posts on their Twitter as if it's the height of oppression. This is why Essence makes 3 separate tweets about a YouTube comment which has nothing wrong with it. But Essence has decided this totally harmless comment means that somebody wants to physically assault them for being trans. So why would somebody choose to be transgender even if that means opening oneself up to persecution? Well, I present Exhibit A, Essence of Thought, somebody who can't get enough of being persecuted. The second problem here is that it's assuming that transtrender refers to all trans people, which is not true at all. I would say the term transgender is most often applied in university, when things are generally getting a lot less shitty and a lot more progressive, and you're much less likely to face persecution for bucking societal norms. Oh, and upon rewatching Essence's video, they add typically teenagers as a qualifier for who is most often called a transgender.
To frame trans folk, typically teenagers.
But this isn't true. Most people who are called transtrenders are young adults. So this is a lie intended to bolster Essence's misrepresentation of the facts. I was dating a woman who did a lot of theatre at university, and rather predictably about half the people who I met when I came to pick her up after a rehearsal were some kind of transgender. There were about 6 people there if you're wondering. But obviously drama typically is a subject for nerds and eccentric weirdos. So in that context, identifying with a label that would see you persecuted by the rest of society would possibly actually work towards your acceptance acceptance in a group that is defined by their rejection by society. And there are a lot of subcultures which are defined by being rejected by mainstream society, and of course, being a transtrender would make complete sense if you almost exclusively socialize within one of those subcultures. Now, the third reason why we might still see transtrenders, even while transgender people are bullied and excluded, lies in an assumption that Essence made. See, when Essence says that trans people get bullied and excluded, so why would anyone ever choose to identify as trans, she's assuming these people wouldn't have been bullied and excluded if they didn't identify as trans. And actually, in my experience, that is never the case. The people who come out as trans are nearly always people who were never popular to begin with, and many, indeed, have actually been bullied throughout their lives. In that case, being trans might be a way to garner some sympathy, as suddenly what was bullying would now become a hate crime, while actually the amount of bullying would quite realistically not increase, since these people were already being bullied and excluded to begin with. I'm not suggesting this makes it okay to bully them, or that they're wrong to try and garner sympathy. I'm just pointing out that this is an obvious reason why somebody might identify as transgender, despite the fact that many transgender people are bullied. Now, I'm not saying that the majority of trans people are transtrenders. However, what I am pointing out is that Essence has claimed that transtrender is a woefully detached label because trans people are bullied and excluded.
And the woefully detached nature of this label quickly becomes apparent.
However, I have presented 3 reasons why the bullying and exclusion of trans people does not mean that there can't be such a thing as a transtrender. Apart from that, there are a few other things I want to address. First of all, Essence uses these attacks as an excuse for why they are done entertaining discussion about transgender identity politics.
And it's hard to maintain your composure when shit like this is the end result. There are trans people out there who can do it, and I say all power to them. I'm not one of them. Not anymore. My patience has been drained.
As if it's discussion of transgender identity politics that is motivating these bullies to commit these acts. These attacks are not motivated by gender-critical ideas, and using the suffering of these children to add some semblance of honour and principle to your refusal to address the challenges of those who have objections about transgender identity politics is really disingenuous. Now, of course, Essence isn't obligated to engage anybody in a debate, and given the attitude they tend to bring to most debates I've seen them wade into, I think it's a good thing Essence has abstained themselves. But people who are willing to have discussions about these issues should not be implicated in the bullying of children being done by kids who just want to pick on somebody different from them. Secondly, Essence says very ominously that perhaps this should motivate us to begin punishing people who cultivate an environment like this.
Should we begin taking incitement to violence more seriously, punishing those who cultivate an environment like this?
Now, let's just bear in mind that Essence of Thought is somebody who saw a supportive comment being left by a fan of a YouTuber and interpreted it to be an incitement to violence. Indeed, Essence also implied that the YouTuber themselves was also proving themselves to be transphobic by favoriting this supportive comment. Fortunately, of course, it seems like there are plenty of people who see Essence of Thought for the rather dodgy character they are, even people in the trans community. But fundamentally, many women will not really be safe expressing their opinions on what womanhood is until this idea that questioning the narrative that men can become women has become thoroughly destigmatized. And videos like this that present such questions as responsible for the violent assaults of young trans people are really pushing the discussion in the wrong direction. Finally, Essence asks, why haven't people who supposedly want to protect trans children spoken out against these attacks?
Why is it that the transphobic people who pretended to be concerned about the well-being of trans children have all failed to speak out against these attacks?
I'm going to guess it's because they haven't heard about them. Now, while I think condemning these attacks goes without saying, I want to clarify that these attacks are nothing other than absolutely disgusting. I'm just taking this time to clarify this because I've mostly been countering the way that Essence has used these attacks to try and argue against gender-critical ideas. And in doing so, many people might have got the impression that I was trying to undermine the significance of these attacks. And while I don't think gender-critical ideas are responsible for these attacks, because obviously they're not, I do occasionally see objectionable claims made by gender-critical feminists. I saw a gender-critical meme recently that said that trans people are not worthy of respect. I 100% condone, shit, that would have been a disaster. I 100% condemn any claims being made to that effect. But the main point of this video is that Essence of Thought interspersed several arguments into this video about trans teens being bullied, and I figured it was worth just addressing those arguments. Maybe someday I will do some more research and return back to this channel. I don't think that's very likely though. But to the people who have asked me to respond to Essence of Thought, I hope this gave a good indication of my thoughts on this channel. Anyway, apart from that, goodbye, like and subscribe and comment. Give on Patreon if you want to get me closer to actually starting to establish a regular schedule for this channel, which will mean probably not more, but certainly better content. And follow me on Twitter for exceptionally occasional updates.